Welcome to Galactic Grandmother. Heart to Heart, my name is April, and my special guest today is ALANDRA MARKMAN. ALANDRA incarnated to experience some of the darker, more horrific aspects of what's going on this planet, so that after he healed himself, he can assist others to heal and educate the public about these programs, which we need to eliminate, completely. Alondra is an empath. He's an intuitive healer. He's a musician, a poet, an author. He uses a form of energetic healing called higher self integration, which he facilitates the client to communicate with their own higher aspects. He also specializes in breaking mind control and removing negative spiritual entities. Alondra also removes etheric implants and clears and repairs your auric field. He's done extensive training in meditation techniques, and he leads one-on-one and group meditations, which I can attest to are fabulous. There's so much about you, Alondra. Oh, you do intuitive readings, which are fantastic, and those include star origin readings. So welcome, Alondra. I'm
Thanks.
so happy to have you with me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Good. I suppose the first thing we should do is go back to the beginning and have you explain how you got into the Montauk Project. And I hate to have you go through this, but I think it's important for people to know what you and hundreds of thousands of other children were subjected to.
From about age 4 to about 11, I was a total mind control slave of the Air Force intelligence people. Yeah, yeah. The classic estimate from the Preston Nichols books is about 300,000 children who went through the project, and I think that's a very conservative estimate.
Oh, that's
Um,
heartbreaking.
yeah, I think it's much more likely to be in the millions, actually. So this is a very large scale operation. It was mostly boys, some girls. A lot of them, like myself, I came from a very kind of broken home, as they call it, a very stressed single mother without a lot of resources. The Air Force people offered her a lot of money and they promised me a very good education.
Hmm.
And so it seemed, just at face value, it seemed like a very good thing to do for her. So I was pretty much sold to the Air Force when I was about 4. So some families got some compensation and some didn't. If there were people who could go missing without explanation, they were just abducted wholesale without any compensation or consideration. So on that level, I guess mine is like one of the better stories where it starts, because my mother actually was, at least sort of had a general idea of where I was. She didn't know what was happening, obviously, but
Hmm.
she got some money, and she thought I was going through some very specialized training programs, which is true.
In the
I mean,
worst way.
in the worst way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason they wanted all these children was children are much more psychically open than adults, generally speaking, because in our culture, we tend to shut down and shame people who display psychic ability. And we have a lot of poison in our food supply. We have a very toxic culture that calcifies people's pineal glands and keeps them kind of asleep and not tuned into their psychic senses and their higher senses.
Hmm.
Um, so children usually are more tuned into the spirit realms. A lot of them talk very freely about their previous incarnations and the spirits that they're with and their imaginary friends. And,
Yeah.
it's a whole different world for children. The Satanists value this very highly. They really like to work with young children because they can warp them to their heart's content and fracture their minds so they develop very complex split personalities or dissociative identity disorder. So yeah, it's kind of like raw material from the Satanist perspective. And the children who they can train, they try to keep them enslaved through adulthood and for life. And the children who can't dissociate very well, or who can't survive some of the trauma, they just kill them and they try to use the energy of murder as sacrifice, and try to draw life force from that experience. And there's a very, very low survival rate for people who went through Montauk. Probably, I mean, conservatively, maybe 1 out of every 9 or 10 survived. I mean,
Wow.
it's probably less than that, but I mean, just I witnessed over years of being there, I witnessed huge groups of children coming and going, and almost all of them died. I mean, I witnessed like groups of dozens of children at a time dying pretty much right in front of me. So I was at least in my cohort, I was one of the longest lived. I mean, obviously, I'm still here, so
Well, let's go back to some of the torture that children were subjected to, just to make it crystal clear to the audience of you were taken, you were stripped, you were put in metal cages, and
yeah.
what did they do?
Uh, yeah, we were in dirty metal cages a lot of the time.
Right.
Um, Treated like animals. They're, um, I mean, often I was treated like a caged dog, and like fed animal food, for instance, and just generally kept in a state where I was very feral, very depraved, and the only human contact I had was with the other prisoners, the other children, and with the Air Force and CIA and Draco people that were there. So it really warped my sense of reality. I mean, I had, vague memories of life
Uh-huh.
before that and my mother, and more normal life, but those were very hard. Those memories became very hard to access as my daily reality became one where every adult was hostile and every child was trying to survive and usually failing. So yeah, and my memories of whatever happened before Montauk became very obscured, because there was torture trauma specifically intended to obscure the memory. Like if I would ever cry for my mother, for instance, I would receive really strong electric shocks. So there's a very direct, targeted torture, to try to dissociate me completely from my previous identity and my previous life. Yeah, because the more they can break you, the more they can form false personalities, and the more they can control you, because you don't have any internal grounding. You don't have any like ego of your own. This is also why they value children, because they want to create an ego from scratch that has nothing to do with who you are as a person and everything to do with what they want you to be.
Right.
Uh,
And they do tortures that force a premature Kundalini awakening.
yes. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That was a very central concern, especially of the higher ranking CIA people and the Draco and the Saurians. So there's several alien groups at Montauk. The Draco are the kind of greenish, very tall reptilian humanoids that a lot of people have talked about.
Uh-huh.
And, they are masquerading as all sorts of people. They're shapeshifters, so they present themselves as human. I don't have to get into that too much, but then
Yeah.
there are also the Saurians, who are slightly smaller, more brown-skinned reptilians, from the Orion system. So the Draco are mostly from the star Draco. The Saurians are mostly from Orion, especially Bellatrix Orion, one of the stars in the constellation. And I have very intense karmic connections to the Orion system, which is something that I came to realize, very pointedly, during the Montauk experience. Part of the reason they chose me was because of my very intense karmic connections to the Orion system and my past lives in Orion. Actually, ironically, on some of the planets in the Orion system, I'm considered like a very exalted being. I'm one of their teachers. And that's part of the reason they were so interested in me here, because they can sense that the Saurians and the Draco are highly psychic, telepathic, but their telepathic abilities are, fully activated. They can use them on
Right.
command. Their ability is very, very controlled, very intense. The reptilians have a lot of Kundalini energy. That's one of the special, you could say, powers of the reptilian body. The human body can only hold so much Kundalini energy. We have other strengths, our sensitivity, our huge range of emotion, our creativity. Like we have these really, really massive kind of soft skills. The reptilians have much kind of harder skills, like massive physical endurance, telepathic capacity, where they can directly take control of the mind of almost any other humanoid species, like just directly by willpower, which is very intense. They can use you as a puppet just based on their mental will alone. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's super intense. Like the mammalian humans, like ourselves, we don't have as much innate capacity for that. And their Kundalini energy, their life force or chi is very, very intense. The levels are a lot higher than a mammalian human. We can say maybe 2 or 3 times higher just to have some reference point. Some of these things I'm guesstimating, but it's good to have some reference.
Right.
And so the reptilians, what they try to do with the the human children is like take complete control of their mind and their kundalini energy, and as you're saying, create false kundalini awakenings. So
Mhm.
this is done by a variety of means. The most advanced saurians and Draco, like the more evolved ones, can actually do it through willpower alone. They can do it
Wow.
telepathically. They can take over
Oh,
your physical body with their mind alone
oh
and
my
completely,
gosh.
yeah, and they can trigger a Kundalini awakening in a human
Wow.
just by willpower. So it's very intense. It's very physical, palpable power that they have with their telepathic ability. The less advanced Saurians and Draco, they're not able to do that at will. They don't have the
Right.
discipline or the experience. So they rely more on technology. And usually it's electromagnetic technology that they use to have a false Kundalini awakening. So the electric and magnetic forces are kind of nature's male and female forces, as I understand them. And a Kundalini awakening is when the electromagnetic energy in your body kind of, you open a channel within your sacrum for the electromagnetic energy to move throughout your spine and, into your brain and throughout your astral bodies. For those who have had it, it's a very intense experience. And under the right circumstances, it usually happens with yogic practice or with a very true lover, or in these physical ways that are more healthy. So what the Saurians and the Draco do, the ones who are less advanced, is they just put you in these giant machines basically, and they run electromagnetic currents throughout your body. And they they can give you the feeling of a Kundalini awakening, even if you're not having one. And once your body gets used to that energy, then they usually engage in some sort of rape or sexual torture so that your Kundalini energy sort of moves along the same pathways that they have opened up with the electromagnetic equipment. So
Oh,
that's a brief version of that.
wow. The premature Kundalini awakening that causes the child to disassociate.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible to stay in your body for that kind of experience, even for a very old soul like myself, not to toot my own
Yeah.
horn, but it's almost impossible to stay in your body while that's happening. And so they also do that to push the humans. I'm just saying humans for, ordinary
Right.
humans like you and me. They they do this partly to push the human out of their body so that they can implant all sorts of stuff in the body. Like they can make introjects of themselves, like an advanced Saurian telepath, for instance, can create a semi-permanent version of themselves inside the human body and take possession of it.
Wow.
Um, yeah. A lot of people understand this as like demonic possession or demonic attachment, which is
Mhm.
fair. It's a totally fair way to think about it. And there are aspects of it that definitely cross over into the pure spirit realms, where there really are demonic beings who come in, and that is facilitated partly by the reptilian humanoids. Yeah, I mean, they once they force you out of your body and your kundalini is activated, they kind of take over a lot of your autonomic nervous system, and you functionally lose control of your body in a lot of ways. Like after that experience, like in my case, for instance, they could basically paralyze me at will
Oh
without
boy.
even the less disciplined saurians,
Uh-huh.
who didn't have the mental power to do it directly. Because I had been handicapped with this electromagnetic process, they were able to basically paralyze me at will or with a set hypnotic command. So that's like, yeah, that's very, yeah,
That's
that's a horror that's beyond
terrifying.
words. Yeah.
Now, after you went through that original Kundalini awakening, then did they train you for some specific jobs?
Hmm. Yeah, they found that I was very quick to dissociate. This is something that they value highly in children. Again, I'm not just to make another guesstimate. I'd say maybe 10 to 12% of the population has this sort of innate ability to dissociate.
Yeah,
And so they're looking for that person. They're looking for that maybe 1 out of 10 people, or that is able to dissociate easily. And then they push you into dissociative states. So I was considered good at that. I mean, I do dissociate very easily, and that's part of, I mean, if you use it in a positive sense, that opens up a lot of spiritual possibilities.
right.
If you leave your body easily, it opens up many possibilities for help and for good things to come in from the spirit realms. Yeah, but in this case, I was pretty much used as a channel, interdimensional channel.
And maybe we should
Um,
just explain that outside of the 3D world here, where we have linear time, there's a multi-dimensional quantum field where all these timelines are happening at once.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was like one of the core Montauk experiences. It was like working with alternate timelines and time travel was like very core to the project. So I was in this, I spent quite a lot of time in this chair that was operated by psychic ability. So this chair at Montauk was brought in from a Zeta Reticulan spacecraft, either brought in or reverse engineered. I think it was actually an original Zeta piece. Yeah, I would dissociate, I would visit other dimensions in my consciousness, in my astral body. Occasionally, I was able to bring my physical body with me, and so it was actually physical travel. But they weren't able to control it very well at that time, and most of it was astral projection. So my body would stay in the chair, my consciousness would go somewhere else. I often remember these kind of grayish tunnels that would take you to different places, different dimensions, and different places in time and space.
Mhm.
So it was a time travel device, you could say.
How
Yeah.
long did this go on? And were there some specific experiences that seemed to stand out to you?
Yeah. Well, the initial period went on for about 7 years. So from age 4, I was probably in the chair. I think I was still 4 the first time I was in the chair, maybe 5. About 8 or 9 months had gone by since I arrived when I got in the chair. So that would put me at about 11 years old when I kind of things started to change because the Zeta Reticulans took their own interest in me, and started to use me for projects outside of Montauk. Yeah, so that things really changed when I was about 11. Yeah, a lot of I mean, I went a lot of places.
Were you bringing back information for the Air Force?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I was trying to change history. Sometimes I was supposed to bring back pieces of information. Sometimes it was just purely experimental or exploratory, like they didn't know what was going to happen. They would just send me somewhere. Because again, they did not have perfect control over it
Oh,
at the time. One of the most meaningful places that I went was southern France. The people at Montauk were very, very interested in certain bloodlines, especially Merovingian bloodlines that run through European royalty, in my case, French and German royalty, Merovingian bloodlines. So the Satanists have a very, very long history with these bloodlines. They have installed most of the monarchs in European history. They're pretty much all practicing Satanists. Like that's just part of the deal of European and American history. Oh yeah, some of my most meaningful experiences at Montauk were going to France, especially southern France, to interact with some of my ancestors, along this Merovingian bloodline that they were so interested in. But basically, I was interacting with a lot of my own ancestors, my blood ancestors, Merovingian ancestors, and I would have to take part in satanic rituals that were part of the French court. Yeah. So this would be roughly, usually I'd be in medieval times. This would be in the 1300s. I would go back to southern France in the 1300s, and I'd be interacting with, the French monarchs of the time and the French court, and I would be just passed around as a commodity, as a sex trafficking slave among the royalty and the royal court. They're very superstitious. They wanted to imbue me with the certain spirit of the Merovingian bloodline so that they could control it in the present and control its destiny in the future. But also, those experiences were very meaningful to me because I had some really true mystical experiences. As if traveling through time and space were not enough.
Uh-huh.
Like some of those experiences were quite spiritual, and the royal bloodlines are also mixed up with the bloodlines of Jesus Christ.
That
Um,
was my next question.
yeah.
Yeah.
So some people know, people who are interested in esoteric Christianity, most of them know that Jesus's wife, Mary Magdalene, came to southern France and created, these kind of breakaway Christian groups that were more faithful to the teachings of Jesus, like the Cathars and a bunch of different groups in southern France that were underground Christian groups before the Catholic Pope kind of was able to take more control, or they were fighting each other for centuries. They still fight each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's this thread of basically like pure kind of Pleiadian light energy also in the area of southern France, which is represented physically in the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
So the strong Palladian light energy in the south of France, was that always there, or was it amplified by Mary when she came?
Earth power is just that. It's you can think of it as morally neutral or maybe slightly good. Earth power is just raw life force. It can be used
Uh-huh.
for any purpose, a good purpose or a bad purpose. So these places that are very meaningful to both the good and the bad operatives on Earth, there's organic Earth energy there that they're using and channeling and siphoning. And like the Earth is just herself. The Earth is all things that we are in this physical
Uh-huh.
incarnation, right? The good or bad quality of how that energy is used is just what we do with it, how we harness it, how we channel it, what sort of disciplines we have around it. But Kundalini energy, for instance, it doesn't belong to anybody, good or bad. It's
Right.
just used for different purposes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these very special places on Earth are kind of like that. I mean, they've been special since time immemorial, since before humanity. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, but then special people come in and they make use of the energy in special ways, and they create even more of an amplified field. Yeah,
For good or bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
and usually both. Version is that I started
So,
working for the Zeta Reticulans more directly at around age 11. And more, they took me away from the Air Force intelligence people and they took me into their own domains. They took me to different star systems. I became more of an asset of the Zeta and less of an asset of the Air Force.
oh
And
wow.
yeah, so the Zeta have their own interests, which are independent of the Draco, independent of
Mm-hmm.
the US government. So I started working more for the Zeta until the point where I believe I was about 13, maybe 14. It was a very profound experience. The Zeta Reticulans faked my death. And so they took my whole body with them, not just the astral part. I went with
Oh,
them physically.
is that so
Um,
they could take full possession of you then?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. So as far as the Air Force knew, I was dead.
Oh,
On their scanners, they saw my dead body. I was in another dimensional space. What they saw on their scanners was that I was dead, no life signs. It was fake. The Zeta Reticulans fed them fake information into the scanners, and I went with them physically. So that's basically how I got away from Montauk, because I became part of the Zeta. Yeah, but yeah. So the Zeta took me away when I was about 13, or they staged my death, and I went with them. A lot of those experiences after that, I'm still in the process of retrieving because the Zeta mind control technology is much more streamlined than the human and even some of the Saurian mind control tech. It's less about dominating the Kundalini energy, and it's more just about um, completely erasing mental information. The Zeta are experts at erasing memory. They're the
wow.
best. They're the best in our galaxy that I'm aware of. Yeah, I mean, this is part of why they are valued so highly in the Dark Alliances,
Uh-huh.
because they bring spectacular technological know-how. They're some of the most advanced with like mechanical technology anywhere in the galaxy. And so, the Draco really, really value that, and the US Air Force really values that. And some of their technology includes memory erasure. It includes creating holographic realities that are false. It includes just like very subtle. I mean, they've had millennia, like easily tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, perfecting these sorts of technologies like memory erasure. And I use air quotes because no memory ever fully gets erased. There's always some trace, but the Zeta are much better at it.
Right.
My memories from that period are a lot harder to access because they're not obscured by traumatic experience. They're obscured by just technological means.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
which and there's a big difference for the person that's healing. For other survivors out there, it's really important to be very patient and very forgiving with yourself. Memories that are obscured by trauma can almost always be retrieved. All you have to do basically is go back to the original trauma, whatever that is. It might be very deeply buried, but there's always a way to get there over time and with enough love and care. You know,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of ways to get there. Meditation and hypnosis are really powerful tools for that. Yeah, and most blocked memories are blocked by trauma. I'm sure there are ways around this. Neuroplasticity. There are ways around anything, but it's an area of my experience that I still don't have much access to, so I can't talk about it that much, unfortunately. But from my reference point at that time, it felt like utter freedom to be with the Zeta. They didn't torture me nearly as much. Like they have a different way of working with people.
Hmm.
Um, um, and it actually helps to a certain extent that this is not my original body, because if I was in my original body, my mind would be way more fragmented.
Then going forward, this gets to a point where something must have happened to your original body
Mhm.
for you to become a walk-in. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. Well, this is okay. Okay. Here's where it also gets pretty confusing because things split into different timelines. And so I can say different things that are, objectively, they can't be true at the same time, and yet they are true at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Because at least in my experience, because my experience fragmented into many different timelines. Okay, so basically on this version of this timeline, the person that I was, my name was Max. I lived to be about 63 years old. And
Wow, you were a prisoner that long?
Well, once I was with the Zeta, it didn't feel as much like being a prisoner.
So how did the whole walk-in procedure work? I mean, what happened? Did
Oh,
you
yeah.
physically die?
Yes, I did physically die.
Were you consciously aware then that you left your body and that you entered into another body?
Yes,
Okay.
I was aware of that. I've done a few interviews about Montauk, and
Mhm.
I'm just starting to talk about the experiences that I had after walking in. But I do think it's really important, in some ways even more important, to talk about the stuff that happens after, because some of it is stuff that nobody else has ever talked about publicly that I'm aware of.
It's gonna blow their mind because they don't have any previous reference to this,
Hmm.
but it's a good jumping off point for people to do their own research.
Hmm.
And I think that we definitely need to come back for a part 2, and
Hmm.
you can begin with the walk-in experience. That would just be fantastic.
That sounds really good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I
too.
appreciate you so
Yes.
much, and we will talk
Appreciate
soon.
it too. Yes, we will.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.